I still remember the smell of the coffee more than anything else. Funny, isn't it? You'd think a day like that, the thing you'd hold onto would be the noise or the running or the faces. But no, for me it's the coffee. I'd bought it from a little cart near the corner, one of those paper cups that burns your fingers through the sleeve, and I was blowing on it when everything started. I never did finish it. I found it later, still sitting on the low wall where I'd set it down, gone cold, a skin forming on the top. Somebody could have walked past it and thought nothing happened there at all. But something did happen there, and I saw it. Let me back up. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because my sister always rang me on Tuesdays, and she'd rung that morning while I was still half asleep, going on about her garden and some neighbor's dog. Ordinary things. The kind of conversation you don't listen to properly and then wish later that you had. I told her I was going into town. She said, "Bring a jacket, it looks like rain." She was right. It usually looked like rain in London that time of year, that gray that isn't quite anything, not warm, not cold, just there, hanging over the rooftops like it couldn't decide. I'd come up to the city to sort out some paperwork, boring stuff, and I had time to kill before my appointment. So I walked. That's what I do when I've got time, I walk. And I ended up drifting toward the parks the way you do, past the big houses and the black railings, past the tour buses with their open tops and the shivering tourists up on the roof of them, cameras out, chins tucked into their collars. The area near the palace and the parks was busy that morning. Not packed, but busy, steady. You had the joggers, red-faced, breathing hard. You had a school group in matching high-vis vests, the teachers doing that head count thing every 30 seconds, that panicked little point-and count. You had a couple of old boys sitting on a bench feeding pigeons, and a woman with a pram walking so slowly she was almost standing still. Regular morning. Regular people. And then, of course, you had the guards. There's a spot where one of them stands, this soldier in the dark uniform, still as anything, and there's always a little knot of tourists gathered around him. Always, doesn't matter the weather. They stand there and they take their photos and they try to get him to smile or blink or move, and he never does. Kids pull faces at him. Grown adults embarrassing themselves, waving their hands in front of him like he's a waxwork. And he just stands, eyes forward. Like he's carved out of something harder than the rest of us. I'd walked past that 100 times in my life and never really looked. That morning, for some reason, I stopped. I don't know why. Maybe because I had the coffee and nowhere to be for 20 minutes. I stood off to the side near that low wall and I watched the little show. There was a family in front of him, a dad trying to get his little girl to stand next to the guard for a photo, and she wouldn't. She was maybe 4, and she kept hiding behind her dad's leg, peeking out, then hiding again. Scared of him, and the dad kept laughing and saying, "He won't hurt you, sweetheart, look, he's a nice man." The guard didn't move, but I swear, and I've thought about this a lot since, I swear I saw his eyes flick down to that little girl, just for a second, just the smallest thing. Like he'd clocked her, understood she was frightened, and was letting her know without a word that it was all right. Then his eyes went back forward. Gone. Like it never happened. I remember thinking, what a job, standing there while the whole world gawps at you, rain or shine, not allowed to itch your nose, and for what? For most of us it's just a photo opportunity, a thing on a list. See the guards, tick. I didn't understand it then. I think I do now. So there I was, coffee in hand, gray sky. The murmur of the crowd, the click of cameras, a bus grinding past, somewhere a busker starting up on a saxophone, that low, mournful sound drifting over the top of everything. The little girl finally letting her dad take the photo. The pigeons. The pram, all of it just ordinary, so completely ordinary. That's the thing nobody tells you about days like that. They don't announce themselves. There's no music swelling, no warning in your gut. 1 second you're blowing on a coffee and half watching a scared little girl, and the next second the ground moves. That's the only way I can describe it. The ground moved. It wasn't like in films. In films there's a big orange fireball and everything goes slow. This wasn't slow. This was fast and it was wrong, and it came from somewhere off to the side, past the trees, deeper toward the park, and it hit you in the chest before your ears even caught up. A sound so big it stopped being a sound and became a thing that pushed you. I felt it in my teeth. In the coffee cup, which I dropped. I found out later I dropped it. I don't remember doing it. I felt the wall behind me shudder. And then there was that half second. That terrible half second of nothing, where the whole world just paused, where the pigeons had already lifted off the ground in a gray cloud but nobody else had moved yet, where the saxophone had stopped mid-note, where 100 people all took the same breath at the same time. And then the screaming started. I'm going to tell you what I saw, and I want you to understand I'm not proud of what I did, because I didn't do anything. I froze. That's the honest truth of it. I stood there with my empty hands still curled around a cup that wasn't there anymore, and I did nothing, while all around me the world came apart. People ran. That's the instinct, isn't it? It's in us, deep down, older than thinking. When something goes bang, you run away from it, and they ran. The school group scattered, the teachers grabbing at high-vis vests, screaming names. The woman with the pram, God, the woman with the pram, she was frozen too, right in the middle of the path, gripping the handle, her mouth open but no sound coming out. The 2 old boys were off their bench. The joggers, the tourists, everyone, all of them moving at once in every direction, crashing into each other. A stampede with no shape to it. There was smoke coming up over the trees now, dark, and a smell. I'll never forget the smell, sharp and chemical and wrong, the smell of something that should never be in the air near a park where children feed ducks. And in the middle of all that, in the middle of that whole boiling mess of panic, there was one still point. The guard. He hadn't moved. I looked at him and I couldn't understand it. People were streaming past him, shoving, falling, and he was standing exactly where he'd been standing, eyes forward in the same spot, holding the same line. For a second my brain couldn't make sense of it. I thought, is he in shock? Is he frozen like me? Has it broken him? And then I saw his face and I understood that it hadn't broken him at all. His jaw was tight. His eyes were moving now, quick, scanning, taking it all in, the smoke, the crowd, the direction people were running. He was thinking, working. Behind that stone face there was a machine turning over fast and cold, and I realized he wasn't frozen. He was deciding. There's a difference between a man who can't move and a man who won't. I'd been the first kind. He was the second. Someone crashed into me from behind and nearly put me on the ground, and by the time I'd got my footing back and looked up again, the guard had moved. Not away from it, toward it. Toward the smoke, toward the thing everyone else was running from at a pace that wasn't quite a run, this fast, controlled stride. And as he went he was shouting, actually shouting. This man I'd assumed never made a sound, shouting at people to get back, to move, pointing them away from the trees, one arm out like a barrier, hurting them. I'll tell you about that in part 2, what he did, what I did after I finally got my legs back. And the little girl, the one who'd been too scared to stand next to him for a photo, I haven't forgotten her, neither had he. But I need you to sit with this part first, the moment itself, because I think about it more than I'd like to admit, that half second of nothing before the screaming, and how in that half second, out of a crowd of 100 running people, one man stood still. He didn't run. He never even flinched. The thing about panic is that it's contagious. You catch it off other people like a cold. One person runs and your body wants to run too, even if your brain hasn't caught up with why. So when 100 people are all running and screaming, the pull to join them is enormous. It's like a tide. It wants to take you with it. And this man was walking against the tide. I watched him go. I want you to picture it because I don't think I'll ever be able to describe it well enough. Everyone flowing one way, this dark blur of coats and bags and terror, and him cutting straight across it, steady, his boots hitting the ground in this even rhythm you could almost have set a watch by. He had one arm out, sweeping people back, and he was shouting short words, hard words. Move, that way, go, keep moving. No panic in it, just command. The kind of voice that makes your body obey before your minds even decided to. And people did obey. That's what got me. In all that chaos, this one calm, loud voice gave them something to hold onto. A jogger who'd been spinning in circles, completely lost, latched onto that voice and went the way the guard pointed. A whole knot of the tourists, the same ones who'd been taking his photo 2 minutes before, they scrambled off in the direction he was sending them. He was pointing them away from the smoke, away from the trees, and I understood this later, away from where a second one might be. That's a thing, apparently. They said it afterward on the news. Sometimes there's more than one and the second is meant for the people running from the first. He'd have known that. It's why he was pushing them the way he was pushing them, not just anywhere, a specific way, a safe way. I didn't know any of that in the moment. In the moment, I just saw a man doing his job while the sky came down. And then I saw the pram. The woman with the pram was still there. Everyone else had scattered, but she was rooted to the spot, right in the middle of the open path, both hands white-knuckled on the handle, and she was just shaking. You know when someone's so frightened they've stopped being able to do anything at all? That was her. Her mouth was moving, but nothing was coming out. The baby in the pram had started to cry, this thin, high wail cutting through everything, and she couldn't even move to comfort it. She was locked. And she was standing in the worst possible place, right out in the open, with the smoke drifting closer. I saw the guard see her. His head turned that quick, scanning turn, and he clocked her, and he changed direction. Just like that. He'd been herding the crowd, and now he broke off and went straight for her. And when he reached her, he didn't waste a second, didn't ask if she was all right, nothing like that. He got a hand on the pram and a hand on her arm, and he moved them, bodily moved them. Steered her off the open path and toward the cover of a low wall, talking the whole time, low now, close to her ear, and whatever he said to her, it worked because her legs started going again. She stumbled, but she went. He kept his body between her and the smoke the entire way. I noticed that. I don't think he even thought about it. He just did it, put himself on the dangerous side like it was the most natural thing in the world. He got her behind the wall, got the pram down low. And then, and this is the bit, he crouched for half a second and looked into the pram at the baby, this screaming red-faced baby, and I watched his face change. Just for that half second. The stone cracked. Something soft went across it. And then it was gone, and he was up again, back to work, back to the crowd, back to that hard scanning face. But I saw it, the crack, I've held on to that. Now here's where I come back into it. Because I promised I'd be honest. And honest means telling you the shameful bit too. I was still by the wall, still frozen, still useless. And I'll tell you what got me moving in the end, what finally broke the freeze. It wasn't bravery. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't courage. It was a sound. It was a child crying. A different child, not the baby. I turned toward it, and there she was. The little girl. The one who'd been too scared to stand next to the guard for a photo. The one who'd hidden behind her dad's leg and peeked out. She was on the ground. She'd been knocked down in the stampede, or she'd fallen, and she was sitting there on the wet path, alone, absolutely alone, this tiny thing in a pink coat, and she was crying and calling out and turning her head every direction looking for her dad. And her dad wasn't there. I found out later he'd been swept the other way. It happens in a crowd like that, a surge, and you're holding your child's hand 1 second, and the next second your hand is empty and you're 20 feet away with a wall of bodies between you, and there is nothing, nothing you can do about it. He was screaming for her. I could hear him somewhere back in the crowd, this raw, broken sound, a man screaming his daughter's name. But he couldn't get to her. The crowd wouldn't let him. And she was sitting right out in the open, same as the woman with the pram, right where nobody should be. I'd love to tell you I ran to her. I didn't. My legs still wouldn't work. I took 1 step, maybe 2, and my whole body was screaming at me to run the other way, the way everyone else was running. And I hated myself for it, but I couldn't override it. I was a coward in that moment. I was. But somebody wasn't. The guard was already moving. He'd got the woman and the baby to safety, and he'd turned back to the crowd, and in all of that, in all that noise and smoke and chaos, he'd heard the same thing I'd heard. That child crying. And out of everything happening, out of 100 emergencies all at once, he'd picked out that one small sound and he was going for it. He crossed that open ground at a dead run now, no more controlled stride, an actual sprint, and he got to her, and he scooped her up off the path in one motion, one arm right under her, lifting her clean off the ground, and he turned his back to the smoke as he did it. Same as before. Put himself between the child and the danger. Wrapped her in against his chest, this little pink thing against all that dark uniform, and her arms went straight round his neck, gripped on tight, the way a frightened child grips. And here's the thing that finished me. That undid me completely. As he carried her, as he ran her back toward the safe side, he had his head bent down close to hers and he was talking to her. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see it. This man who I'd stood and watched 20 minutes earlier not blink, not smile, not move a muscle while the whole world tried to make him react. This same man was running through smoke with a child in his arms, murmuring to her, and whatever he was saying was making her hold on tighter and cry a little quieter. He'd seen her. That's what got me. 20 minutes before, when she was too scared to stand near him for a photo, his eyes had flicked down to her, that tiny thing I'd noticed and thought I'd imagined. He'd seen her then. And when it mattered, when it really mattered, he came back for her. I don't know if he recognized her. Probably not. Probably she was just a child who needed help and that was enough. But I like to think he did. I like to think that in some corner of that disciplined mind, he knew that's the little one who was frightened of me, and he came anyway, and he held her like she was the most precious thing in London. He got her to the wall, to the woman with the pram actually, set her down right there next to them, in the safe spot he'd made, this little pocket of shelter he'd carved out of the chaos. And the woman with the pram, still shaking herself, still terrified, she reached out and pulled the little girl in against her, wrapped her up, this stranger, held someone else's child because that's what you do, because in a moment like that we're all just people trying to keep the small ones safe. And the guard, he straightened up, looked back at the crowd, at the smoke, at the work still to be done. And he went back into it. That's the part I can't get over. Any one of the things he'd done, you'd call it enough. Getting the woman clear, getting the baby down, getting the child out of the open. Any one of those and you'd say, that man's a hero, he did his bit, no one could ask more. But he didn't stop. He turned around and he walked back into the smoke to do it again, for the next person. And the next, because there were more of them out there and he wasn't finished. And it didn't seem to occur to him for 1 second that he was allowed to stop. I finally moved after that. I want you to know that. It shames me that it took me so long, but I did move. I got to the little girl's father, followed the sound of him screaming her name, and I grabbed his arm and I told him, "She's safe, she's over there, she's safe, come on." And I dragged him through and I put him back together with his daughter. That's the one thing I did that day. The one thing. I reunited a father with his child. It's not much next to what that guard did. But it's mine and I hold on to it. And I think if I hadn't watched him move first, I'd never have moved at all. You don't know what you'll do in a moment like that. Nobody does until it happens. I found out I was a coward for about 90 seconds, and then I found out I could be a little bit less of one because I'd seen a braver man show me how. The sirens were coming now. That sound building in the distance, growing, that two-note wail that means help is on its way, more and more of them layering up until the whole sky seemed full of it. The professionals were coming, the people whose job it is. But before any of them arrived, before a single one of them got there, there'd been one man already on the scene. One man who hadn't run, who'd been standing there the whole time at his post in his dark uniform, and who, the second the ground moved, had walked toward the danger instead of away from it. He'd been there all along. That's the part I want you to hold on to going into the last of this. He didn't come running when the alarm went up. He didn't arrive. He was already there. He was there before it happened, and he was there during, and he'd have been there after, because that was his post, and standing his post was the whole of who he was. There's more to tell you. What happened when the crowd started to come back. What the little girl did. And the thing he said, the one thing I actually heard him say at the very end when it was all over, that I've carried with me every single day since. It's strange how quiet it gets after. You think the loud part is the explosion. It isn't. The loud part is what comes after: the screaming, the sirens, the running feet, the shouting. And then slowly all of that drains away. The professionals arrive and they take over, the paramedics and the police and the ones in the heavy gear, and they move everyone back, and the noise pulls away from you like a tide going out, and what's left is this ringing hush. A shocked kind of silence. The silence of a place that's just seen something it shouldn't have. I stood on the safe side of it, behind the line they'd set up, and I watched. That's mostly what any of us could do by then. Watch. There was a blanket round my shoulders. I don't remember anyone putting it there, but there it was, one of those thin silver ones that crinkle. Someone had handed me a cup of tea too sweet, and my hands were shaking too much to drink it. Shock does that. Comes for you later after the danger's past, sits you down and makes you shake. The little girl was with her dad. That's the first thing I made sure of, over and over, my eyes going back to them. He had her up on his hip and he wasn't putting her down, not for anything. This man clutching his daughter like the ground might open up again and take her. She had her face buried in his neck. And every so often he'd close his eyes and just hold on tighter, and you could see him thanking God, or the sky, or whatever a man thanks when he's nearly lost the thing he loves most, and then got it back. The woman with the pram was being seen to by a paramedic. The baby had stopped crying. Small mercy. There's something about a baby that stopped crying that lets a whole crowd breathe out. And the guard. Well, that's the thing. I looked for him. I looked for him because I needed to see him. I needed to know he was all right. This man I didn't know, whose name I didn't know, who I'd watched do the bravest things I've ever seen a person do. I scanned that whole scene for the dark uniform. And I found him. He was back at his post. I want you to understand what I mean by that. After all of it, after the woman, the baby, the little girl, after going back into the smoke again and again, after doing more in 10 minutes than most of us do in a lifetime, he had walked back to the exact spot where he'd been standing when it started. And he was standing there. Same position, eyes forward, back straight, like nothing had happened. Like it was just another gray Tuesday and he was on duty, and there was a post to be stood and he was standing it. His uniform was filthy. There was ash on him, gray smears across that dark cloth, and something on his sleeve that might have been blood, his or someone else's, I couldn't tell. His face was streaked with it, and still he stood there, perfectly still, doing the one thing he'd been doing all along, the thing the whole world had watched him do that morning without understanding it, holding his ground. A paramedic went over to him. I watched it. She wanted to check him over, of course she did, look at the state of him, and I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the shape of it. She was telling him to sit down, let me look at you, you need to be seen to. And he shook his head. Just once, a small movement, no thank you, and his eyes never left the front. She tried again, put a hand on his arm, and he said something to her, something short, and whatever it was, she stopped. She stepped back. She looked at him for a moment. This look I understood completely, because I'd been feeling it all morning, a look of not quite being able to believe what she was seeing. And then she nodded, and she left him to it, because there are some things you don't argue with, and a man standing his post is one of them. He wasn't going to leave. Not until he was told to. Not until someone with the authority to relieve him came and relieved him. That was the rule, and the rule was the whole of it, and he was going to hold that line if it killed him. Here's the part I've been saving. Before they moved us all back for good, before the cordon went right up and the scene got sealed off, there was a moment. The little girl, the one in the pink coat, the one he'd carried out of the smoke, she wriggled down off her dad's hip, and before he could stop her she was off, running, this tiny thing on unsteady legs, and she ran straight to the guard. Everyone tensed. Her dad started after her, but she got there first, and she stopped in front of him, right where she'd been too frightened to stand 2 hours before, and she looked up at him. And he looked down at her. He broke his position to do it, broke it. This man who wouldn't sit down for a paramedic, who wouldn't leave his post for anything, he looked down and met her eyes. And she reached up and she held out her hand, and in her hand was something small. I found out after what it was. It was a little sticker, one of those shiny star ones kids get, that had somehow survived the whole thing stuck to the sleeve of her coat, and she'd peeled it off and she was giving it to him. This is for you. The way a child gives you the most precious thing they own, which to a child is whatever happens to be in their hand. And he took it. He crouched down, right down to her level, and he held out his hand and let her press that little star sticker into his palm, and he closed his fingers round it like it was made of gold. And he said something to her, quiet, just for her, and she smiled. This enormous smile, the kind only children have, the kind that doesn't know yet that the world can be a frightening place, or maybe knows it now and is smiling anyway. And then her dad reached them and scooped her back up, and she waved at the guard over her father's shoulder as they carried her away. The guard stood back up, back to his position, eyes forward, ash on his face, a child's star sticker closed in his fist, and I would put money on the fact that he kept it. That somewhere, that man still has a little shiny star that a frightened girl in a pink coat gave him on the worst morning of both their lives. I never learned his name. I've tried over the years. I've looked. But it was never really about a name, the way I never learned it, and it never mattered. Because what I saw that day wasn't really about one particular man. It was about what a person can be when everything in them is trained toward something bigger than themselves. It was about a uniform that isn't just cloth, and a post that isn't just a spot on the ground, and a duty that most of us walk past 100 times in photograph and never once understand. We think it's for show, the standing still, the stone face. We think it's a bit of theater for the tourists, a nice photo, a thing on a list. See the guards tick. It isn't for show. I know that now. I learned it the day the ground moved. That stillness, that discipline, that thing we all found so funny, the not blinking, the not smiling, the standing there while the world tries to make you react, that's not theater. That's the practice. That's a man teaching himself, hour after hour, day after day, to hold steady no matter what comes at him. So that when the day comes that something truly does come at him, he doesn't run. He doesn't freeze. He does what he spent his whole life learning to do. He stands his post. I finished my sister's advice that morning in the end. She told me to bring a jacket because it looked like rain. It did rain later after all of it, this soft gray drizzle coming down over the parks and the cordons and the abandoned coffee cups, washing the ash off the pavements. I stood under it and let it come. I found my coffee, cold on the wall where I'd left it, and I couldn't drink it, but I picked it up anyway. I don't know why. It felt wrong to leave it. I think about that man every time it rains in the city now. Every time I see one of those guards and the tourists gathered round and some kid pulling a face trying to make him laugh. I don't laugh anymore. I stand there off to the side and I watch and I think, you have no idea, any one of them. You have no idea what's standing in front of you. Because I saw one of them once on a gray Tuesday decide who he was going to be. The whole world ran one way, and he, one man, alone, in a dirty uniform, with a child's star sticker in his fist. He walked the other way. And he never even flinched.